Why was her call sign suddenly lighting up a frequency no one expected to hear? The radio crackled like it was struggling to breathe. Voices overlapped. Static fought for space between words that mattered more than anyone wanted to admit. Somewhere in the mountains, 320 Rangers were pinned down, bleeding minutes they didn't have. Ammunition thinning, casualties mounting. The kind of situation that didn't wait for meetings or permissions or clean chains of command. Lieutenant Colonel stood in the operations center, staring at a tactical map that refused to change no matter how long he looked at it. Red icons surrounded blue ones like a closing fist. He knew this moment. Every commander did. The moment where the right decision was obvious, but unreachable. Authorization was still pending. Joint Command wanted verification, risk assessments, jurisdiction clarity, all the things that made sense on paper and meant nothing under fire. Then a voice cut through the noise. "I'm wheels up from Kandahar, 20 minutes out. Don't tell them I'm coming." Froze. Not because the message was reckless, but because the voice wasn't supposed to exist anymore. For a moment, the room forgot how to breathe. Analysts stared at their screens. Radio operators looked at each other like someone had just said a name you weren't supposed to say out loud. Stepped closer to the console. "Say again, identify yourself." A pause, just long enough to feel intentional. "Phantom 7. The call sign landed like a memory someone had buried on purpose. "She's not cleared," someone whispered. "She's not even in theater," another said. Felt something tighten in his chest. "You're not authorized to launch," he said carefully. "I know," the voice replied, calm, unapologetic. "That's why this works." The line went dead. No explanation, no justification, just the echo of rotors already spinning somewhere far too close. At forward operating base Nightingale, dust lifted from the landing pad before anyone had given permission. A Chinook dropped out of the early morning sky like it had been summoned, not dispatched. The kind of arrival that didn't ask questions. The side door opened before the blades slowed. She jumped down. Smaller than most people expected, lean, controlled, every movement efficient like wasted energy offended her. Her flight suit was worn in the way that didn't come from routine hours. This was fabric that had been tested and trusted. Hair pulled back tight, face unreadable. Captain Anderson, the air operations officer, looked up just in time to feel his stomach sink. "Who authorized that landing?" he demanded. "Nobody," she said, already walking past him. "Which is why you're going to pretend it didn't happen." He followed her into the operations room, still processing. "This base logs every aircraft." "Then log a malfunction," she said without slowing. "Electrical fault, emergency landing, nothing official, nothing with my name on it." She stopped at the tactical display and leaned in, eyes scanning terrain, elevations, enemy arcs. "How long before ammo becomes critical?" Anderson swallowed. 30 minutes, maybe less. "And ground extraction?" "Impossible." She nodded once, not disappointed, not surprised, just confirming what she already knew. Behind her calm, something else moved. Calculation, memory, the weight of decisions made before, decisions that didn't end cleanly. "You understand what you're asking," Anderson said quietly. "If this goes wrong—" "It's on me," she interrupted. "Always was." He stared at her. 7 years. That's how long it had been since anyone on this base had seen her. 7 years since her reassignment. 7 years of rumors that never quite added up. "Captain," he said, finally recognizing her fully. She didn't look at him. Nobody remembers that name. She keyed the radio. "Get me the ground commander." The Ranger commander's voice came through strained but steady. He explained the situation. A dry riverbed, high ground on 3 sides, enemy fire coordinated, disciplined, not a random ambush. This was planned. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she spoke like she was already there. "We'll suppress the north and east ridges. When I mark my position, you move, fast, controlled, no hesitation." A pause, then, "Who authorized this?" "Nobody," she replied again. "That's the point." Something shifted in the ranger's voice. Relief maybe, or belief. "We can do it," he said. She set the mic down. "I need 6 minutes," she told Anderson. "Clear airspace, no questions." "This will end your career," he said. She met his eyes for the first time. There was no fear there, just understanding. Some things are more expensive than careers. She turned and walked back toward the helicopter. As the Chinook lifted, Anderson realized something he hadn't allowed himself to think before. Protocol was safe, but safety had never saved anyone. How did a cargo helicopter, with no guns, become the most dangerous thing in the valley? The mountains opened beneath them like a wound. As the Chinook cleared the ridge line, the world dropped away into a wide, dry riverbed by old floods and newer violence. Dust hung in the air like smoke that hadn't decided where to settle. Below, 320 rangers clung to the earth, spread thin along the wadi, pinned by angles that favored the enemy in every cruel way imaginable. Captain didn't need the targeting feed to see it. She felt it. The way the terrain funneled movement, the way the ridges leaned inward, not naturally but tactically. Someone had chosen this place. Someone had waited. Her co-pilot, Captain James Reeves, sat rigid beside her. His hands hovered near the controls like they didn't trust themselves not to interfere. "Jesus," he breathed, "they're everywhere." Muzzle flashes flickered from the north ridge first, then the east. Small arms fire stitched the air in invisible lines that all seemed to converge on the same trapped pocket of men. 320 lives. Adjusted their heading without speaking. Reeves said, voice tight, "We don't have door guns. We don't have escorts in clothes. This is a cargo bird." "I know," she replied. "Then what exactly is the plan?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she brought the Chinook lower, much lower than Reeves was comfortable with. The altimeter unwound fast. The helicopter roared into the valley, its shadow spilling across the like a warning. "The plan," she said finally, "is to make them look at us instead." Rounds snapped past the fuselage. The first impacts came quick and sharp, metallic cracks that made Reeves flinch. "We're taking fire." "Yes," said calmly, "that means it's working." Below them, Major felt the sound before he saw it. The deep, chest-rattling thunder of rotors cutting mountain air. He looked up just as the Chinook screamed over the ridge, low and aggressive, completely unconcerned with self-preservation. "Holy hell," someone muttered. Didn't smile, but something loosened in his chest. "That's our window," he said. "Get ready." Back in the cockpit, warning lights blinked like nervous thoughts. "Port engine temp is rising," Reeves said. "She's getting hot." Banked harder. The helicopter swung toward the north ridge, closing distance fast enough that individual figures became visible. Fighters scattered, some firing wildly, others ducking as the massive aircraft bore down on them like a steel animal. She wasn't shooting. She was invading their certainty. Fear rippled through the enemy line. Formations broke, angles collapsed. That was all it took. "Marking now," said into the radio. Down below didn't hesitate. Move now, west, don't stop." 320 rangers surged out of the wadi, controlled chaos, wounded men half-carried, ammunition redistributed mid-stride. No screaming, no panic, just movement fueled by discipline and the knowledge that someone had bought them time. The Chinook pulled up just long enough to swing toward the east ridge. This time, the enemy was ready. Fire intensified, tracer rounds clawed upward. The helicopter shuddered as bullets punched through skin and frame. "Engines spiking," Reeves shouted. "We're pushing limits." Felt it too. The subtle vibration shift, the way the controls resisted just a fraction more than they should. How long, she asked. 2, maybe 3 minutes before we lose it. She nodded once. Then we don't waste them. She dropped altitude again. Reeves stared at her. You're insane. No, she said softly, I'm angry. The Chinook thundered directly over the east ridge, so low that debris lifted into the rotors. Fighters broke, scattered by instinct. You couldn't aim when something that big was screaming at you, close enough to feel. That's when the Apache arrived. 2 gunships tore into the valley like judgment, rockets streaking, cannons roaring. Precision violence, controlled, brief. The ridges fell quiet. Not silent, but manageable. Below, Rangers ran. Above, the Chinook screamed. Inside the cockpit, the port engine failed. The warning light went solid red. We lost it, Reeves yelled. One engine. Felt the aircraft sag. Felt gravity grab for it like it had been waiting. She compensated instantly. Adjusted pitch. Shifted power. Muscle memory layered over experience earned the hard way. 1 engine flies, she said. 2 just makes it easier. Reeves laughed once, sharp and terrified. You say that like it's comforting. It's not meant to be. She glanced down. The last Rangers cleared the wadi. She exhaled for the first time since entering the valley. Objective complete, she murmured. Now came the part no one else could help with. The mountains rushed beneath them as she turned toward base. Every vibration was louder now. Every sound carried consequence. How far? Reeves asked. 3 clicks. With 1 engine. With 1 engine. The helicopter trembled like it knew the odds. Keyed the radio. Nightingale Phantom 7 inbound. Port engine is gone, others under stress. Clear the pad. The reply came instantly. Pad is clear. Emergency crews standing by. She didn't answer, she was counting instead. Altitude, speed, distance, seconds. This wasn't fear. Fear was loud. This was focus sharpened by the knowledge that if she failed now, everything before would mean nothing. The landing pad came into view. 200 feet, Reeves whispered. Angled the nose. 100. The remaining engine screamed, pushed beyond design, beyond kindness. 50. The helicopter shook violently. 10. Impact. The Chinook slammed onto the pad with a brutal crunch. Metal screamed, alarms blared, but it stayed upright. Silence rushed in like water. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Reeves laughed again, breathless. You landed a dead helicopter. No, said quietly, unstrapping. I landed a stubborn one. She dropped from the aircraft before the rotors fully stopped, already moving toward the operations center. Behind her, 320 Rangers were alive. She didn't look back, because she knew something Reeves didn't yet. Saving them was the easy part. Living with what it cost was harder. And the reckoning was just beginning. Why did saving them feel heavier than losing them ever could? By the time the rotors stopped spinning, the adrenaline had already begun to drain from his body, leaving behind the quiet tremor that always followed survival. Not fear, not relief, just the awareness that she was still here when she easily might not have been. Emergency crews swarmed the Chinook. Fire suppression teams circled the smoking engine. Medics waited, scanning her face for signs of shock. Waved them off. I'm fine, she said, already walking away. Captain Anderson met her at the operations center door. He looked older than he had an hour earlier. The Rangers, she asked. All accounted for, he said. 8 wounded, none critical. She nodded, that was all. No smile, no visible relief, just the smallest release of tension in her shoulders, like something she'd been carrying had finally been set down. They're calling it a mechanical emergency in the logs, Anderson continued. Joint Command hasn't asked questions yet. They will, said. They always do. Inside the debrief room, the Rangers were already being processed. Gear stripped, wounds cleaned, names checked off lists. Major stood at the front, watching his people with an intensity that bordered on reverence. 320 alive. He'd led men through firefights before. He'd written letters home. He stood over flag-draped forms and wondered what he could have done differently. This time, there were no letters. When one of his platoon leaders finally asked the question, didn't answer right away. Who flew that helicopter? Inhaled slowly, a pilot. The pause told them everything. That wasn't just flying, another officer said. That was something else. Nodded once. Her name is Captain, that's all you need to know. And the rest, someone asked. Classified, replied. And if you're smart, you'll let it stay that way. But soldiers talk. By nightfall, the story had taken on a life of its own. In mess tents and quiet corners, Rangers replayed the moment the Chinook appeared overhead. How it had come in low. How it had stayed when logic said it should leave. She flew like she was pissed, one private said. Not reckless, focused, like she was mad at the universe. She never hesitated, another added, even when she was taking hits. Theories grew. Special Operations Test Pilot, Black Program Asset, something older, something buried. No one got it right, but they all felt the same thing. Someone had chosen them. At Kandahar Air Base, sat alone in a small, windowless office across from Lieutenant General Richard. He didn't waste time. You launched without authorization. Yes, sir. You violated Joint Command orders. Yes, sir. You risked international incident, chain of command collapse, and catastrophic loss of equipment. Yes, sir. He studied her. Why? Didn't answer immediately. Not because she didn't know, but because the answer never sounded reasonable to people who hadn't lived it. They were going to die, she said finally. Not hypothetically, mathematically. Leaned back. You're saying you ran numbers. Yes, sir. And decided rules didn't apply. I decided lives mattered more. Silence stretched. Opened a folder. Inside were photos, old, grainy, operations that didn't officially exist. You've been reassigned, demoted, and quietly reinstated 3 times, he said. Most people would stop. Most people weren't trained to stop, replied. His eyes narrowed slightly. How many times have you done this? As many as necessary. He closed the folder. This rescue will be classified as routine. No unauthorized actions, no named pilot. Understood. But as she stood to leave, he added, Be careful, Captain. Systems forgive once, maybe twice. They don't forgive patterns. Paused at the door. With respect, sir, she said quietly, systems survive because of patterns. 2 weeks later, General arrived at Forward Operating Base Nightingale. She didn't ask for briefings. She demanded truth. I want the pilot, she said. When stepped into the room, something shifted in the air. Recognition. Not professional. Personal. Captain said slowly, walk with me. They stopped at the perimeter fence, where mountains cut the horizon. You broke protocol, said. Yes, ma'am. You flew a damaged aircraft into a kill zone. Yes, ma'am. You saved 320 soldiers. Said nothing. Pulled up her sleeve. A phoenix tattoo stared back from her wrist. His breath caught before she could stop it. You were Raven 9, said. Silence. Then quietly, yes. I was Raven 2, replied. Different era, same program. The past rose like a ghost between them. They trained us to choose, said, then pretended we never existed. They taught us judgment, said, then punished us for using it. Nodded, what you did was illegal. I know. It was also right. Looked away. Be careful, continued. You've drawn attention, good and bad. Story of my life. That night stood on the flight line, staring at the Chinook. A maintenance chief approached her, William Cross, weathered, quiet. My sister flew like you, he said. Phoenix program, Raven 6. Swallowed. I knew her. He nodded, tears unshed. Then you know why this matters. Did. Because standing in the gap never ended. It just changed faces. And somewhere ahead, another impossible decision was already forming. Why did the silence before the next mission feel louder than gunfire? 3 days passed without orders. For that was never a good sign. She stayed close to the flight line, close to engines and fuel and motion, things that made sense, things that obeyed physics. Bureaucracy didn't, silence didn't, and the kind of quiet that followed what she'd done felt deliberate, like someone somewhere was deciding whether she was a liability or a solution. At night she didn't sleep much. When she did, the dreams came fragmented, rotors cutting air that turned suddenly thick, a valley folding inward, a voice on the radio that never finished its sentence. She woke before impact every time. On the fourth morning, a black SUV rolled onto the base without markings. No flags, no escort, just confidence. General didn't come alone. The man beside her wore civilian clothes that fit too well to be civilian. No rank on his chest, no insignia. His eyes cataloged everything without appearing to look at anything at all. Felt it immediately. This wasn't about discipline. This was about ownership. They met in a briefing room stripped of screens and maps. Just a table, 3 chairs, no recorders. The civilian spoke first. Captain, or would you prefer Raven 9? She didn't answer. Watched her carefully, not protectively, not aggressively, like a commander watching someone stand at the edge of a cliff they'd already jumped from once. You've been busy, the man continued. You broke protocol again. You embarrassed a few people, saved a lot more. Folded her hands on the table, steady, controlled. If this is about punishment, I already know the speech. He smiled faintly. It's not. That worried her more. There's a problem, he said, one we can't officially acknowledge. Leaned forward. A special reconnaissance team went dark in the corridor. Not Rangers, not regular SOF. His jaw tightened slightly. Ravens. The civilian's smile disappeared. Yes. The word sat heavy in the room. How many? Asked. 6, replied. Embedded deep. Surveillance, human intelligence, counter-network tracking. And they went dark, said. 18 hours ago, the man added. Last transmission was fragmented. They weren't compromised by chance. Closed her eyes briefly. Ravens didn't vanish by accident. What do you want from me? She asked. Met her gaze. We want you to bring them home, or confirm they can't be. And authorization, asked though she already knew. The civilian leaned back. Unofficial on paper, disavowed if necessary. Laughed quietly, no humor in it. Of course. You know the terrain, said. You know the doctrine, and after what you did with that Chinook, people are willing to look the other way. Stood, walked to the window. The mountains looked calm. They always did from a distance. Why me? She asked. The civilian answered this time. Because you won't hesitate. She turned. That's not always a virtue. No, he agreed, but it's always useful. She thought of Raven 6, of Cross's sister, of all the names that lived quietly in her memory, never spoken aloud. If I do this, she said, there's no coming back. Nodded, there never was. Exhaled slowly. Then I'll need a different aircraft, she said, and a sniper. I already have one, replied. Hours later, met Staff Sergeant Park on the flight line. Park didn't look like what most people expected from a sniper. No theatrics, no bravado, just stillness. The kind that suggested she'd already thought through every possible outcome and accepted them. "I hear you don't fly by the book," Park said. "I hear you don't miss," replied. Park smiled once, brief. "I miss, I just don't miss twice." They reviewed intel together. Sparse, uncomfortable gaps, heat signatures last seen near a canyon choke point. Too clean, too quiet. "It's a trap," Park said. "Yes," agreed. "That's why we're going." The aircraft was lighter this time, faster, modified, still unmarked. As they lifted off under cover of night, felt the old sensation settle in. Purpose. Not pride, not excitement. Alignment. Halfway to the corridor, Park broke the silence. "Why do you keep doing this?" Didn't answer right away. "Because someone has to," she said finally. "That's not an answer," Park replied. Glanced at her. "It's the only honest one." The canyon emerged ahead like a mouth waiting to close. They flew low, quiet, no lights. Park scanned through optics, breath measured. "There," she said, "movement, too disciplined for locals." Adjusted course, "That's our point of entry." The first shots came without warning. The aircraft jerked, warning lights flared. "Contact," Park shouted. Dove hard, skimming rock walls so close Park could see individual cracks. Park leaned out calm as gravity, one shot, then another. Targets dropped silently. They touched down in a narrow clearing just wide enough to exist. 2 minutes, said. Park was already moving. They found the ravens fast. Too fast. 3 were alive, bound, bruised, still defiant. The other 3 didn't look too long. One of the survivors grabbed her arm. "They were waiting," he rasped. "They knew call signs, frequencies, everything." Stomach sank. This wasn't a local problem. This was a leak. "Can you move?" she asked. The raven nodded, barely. Gunfire erupted again. Park covered them with surgical precision. No wasted movement, no wasted rounds. Hauled the wounded aboard. The aircraft took hits as they lifted. One engine coughed. "Not again," Park muttered. Pushed the aircraft hard, too hard. "Hold on," she said. They cleared the canyon by meters. Silence followed, heavy, earned. Back at base, medics took over. The ravens were alive, but shaken. One looked back as he was wheeled away. "They sent you," he said, not a question. "Yes," replied. "Good," he whispered. "That means we mattered." Later, alone, sat on the edge of the flight line. Hands shaking now, finally. She pressed them together, stilled them. Saving people never erased the cost. It just reminded her why she paid it. And somewhere beyond the mountains, someone else was already watching. Learning. Waiting. What happens when the one who always chooses others finally runs out of places to hide? The inquiry didn't arrive with uniforms or raised voices. It arrived quietly, folded into routine, disguised as procedure. Sensed it before anyone said a word. The air on base felt different. Eyes lingered a second longer. Conversations paused when she entered rooms. Not fear, not admiration. Calculation. She stayed out of it, flew when asked, didn't volunteer for anything, didn't retreat either. That was the mistake people made when they thought survival meant invisibility. Survival, she had learned, meant consistency. Staff Sergeant Park found her late one evening on the flight line, sitting on a crate, helmet beside her, watching maintenance crews work under white lights. "They're circling," Park said. Didn't look up, "They always do. This time feels." Nodded, "Because it is." Park hesitated. "You okay?" The question caught off guard, not because it was invasive, but because it was genuine. "I don't know," she said after a moment. "I'm still useful. That usually buys time." Park sat beside her. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, Park said, "You ever wonder what happens when they don't need you anymore?" Smiled faintly. "I don't wonder, I plan." 2 days later, the call came. Not from command. From the Rangers. Major stood in the doorway of the briefing room, helmet tucked under his arm, eyes sharp with the kind of urgency that didn't ask permission. "We've got a problem," he said. Was already on her feet. A patrol, small, embedded, operating under advisory cover, had gone silent near the border. Not a dramatic ambush. No explosions, just absence. The kind that ate at commanders because it felt intentional. ISR asked. Minimal, weather's turned, terrain's ugly. An authorization, she asked. Met her eyes, pending. Exhaled slowly. How many, she asked. 6. The number landed hard. Again. Park caught's expression and understood instantly. "This isn't coincidence," Park said quietly. "No," replied, "it's pattern." They launched before the ink dried on anything official. This time the aircraft carried more than fuel and gear. It carried expectation, the unspoken belief that if it was at the controls, people came home. That belief terrified her, because belief like that didn't survive failure. The terrain was unforgiving. Narrow passes, sudden elevation changes, wind that shifted without warning, flew manually, every sense tuned, every adjustment deliberate. They found the patrol near dusk. Too late. The scene told its story without words. Defensive positions hastily formed, ammunition spent unevenly, blood where people had fallen trying to move someone else. Park moved through it silently, eyes scanning, rifle steady. One survivor remained, barely conscious, young, shocked. Knelt beside him. "You're safe," she said. His eyes focused with effort. "They waited," he whispered. "They knew where we'd be." Again. Back at base, the room felt smaller. Was there the civilian man, too? This time, there was no pretense. "You're compromised," the civilian said bluntly. Didn't argue. "There's a leak," added, "high enough to touch multiple channels." "And you think it's me," said. "We think," the civilian replied carefully, "that wherever you go, something follows." Absorbed that. Not accusation. Implication. "They're baiting me," she said. "Yes," agreed, "and you keep taking it." Stood slowly. "Because people keep dying." The civilian folded his hands. "Which makes you predictable." That stung more than she expected. "You're standing down," said, effective immediately. Silence pressed in. Park looked at, "Say something." Didn't. Because part of her knew they were right. Predictability killed people too. That night packed her locker, not ceremoniously, efficiently, the way she did everything. Park watched from the doorway. "You're not done," she said. "I might be," replied. Park shook her head. "You don't get to just disappear." Met her gaze. "Watch me." She left the base before sunrise. No goodbyes, no ceremony, just a woman walking away from the only place that had ever made sense. For 3 days, nothing happened. Then the attack came. A coordinated strike on a forward logistics hub. Clean, precise, timed to the minute. They weren't testing defenses. They were sending a message. Heard about it on a civilian radio, sitting in a rented room miles away. 6 dead. 12 wounded. And a call sign left behind. Phantom 7. Her blood went cold. They weren't just following her. They were using her. She stood slowly, the weight of it settling into her bones. Running wouldn't stop this. Standing down wouldn't either. Only one thing would. She went back. Not to base. To the source. using channels she hadn't touched in years, reached out to ghosts, old ravens, disavowed operators, people who lived off-grid not because they wanted to, but because the world had pushed them there. They answered, because they always did. Park found her at an abandoned airstrip under a sky too clear for comfort. "You didn't stand down," Park said. "No," replied, "I adapted." Park smiled grimly. "Good, because I'm coming." "What about orders?" Park shrugged. "I've never been good with those." Together, they studied the intel had pieced together. A network hybrid, using stolen comms mimicking protocols, turning trust into a weapon. "They want you visible," Park said. "Yes," replied, "so we give them what they want." Park raised an eyebrow. "That sounds reckless." Met her gaze. "No," she said softly, "this time it's deliberate." As they prepared, felt something unfamiliar. Not confidence. Clarity. For the first time, she wasn't reacting. She was choosing the battlefield. And whatever came next, career, consequences, or silence, she would face it on her terms. Because dignity, she'd learned, didn't ask permission. It acted. Why did the end feel quieter than the beginning? Dawn broke without ceremony over the abandoned airstrip. No alarms, no engines warming, just wind moving through dry grass and the distant sound of a world that didn't know what was about to change. Stood at the edge of the tarmac, flight jacket zipped, helmet under her arm. The aircraft behind her wasn't impressive. Older, modified by hands that cared more about reliability than recognition. It carried no markings, no flag, no promise of rescue. Exactly how she wanted it. Park checked her rifle one last time, movements economical, unhurried. "If this works," she said, "they'll never admit it. If it doesn't," replied, "they'll deny it." Park smiled faintly, comforting. They lifted off as the sun crept higher, flying low enough that the terrain felt close, personal. This wasn't a chase. It wasn't a rescue. It was a confrontation. The coordinates had pieced together led them to a compound hidden in the folds of the mountains. Not large, not heavily defended. That was the point. Power like this didn't need walls. It needed access. They circled once. Park leaned forward, scanning. Comms antenna disguised as civilian relay. "That's our nerve." Nodded. "They've been listening to everything." "And shaping it," Park added. Felt a familiar tightening in her chest. Not anger this time. Sadness. The kind that came when you realized how much damage could be done without firing a single shot. They landed outside the perimeter, quiet, intentional. Inside the compound, the air smelled of electronics and stale coffee. Men and women sat at terminals, headphones on, eyes fixed on streams of data. They didn't look like villains. That was the most unsettling part. One of them looked up and froze. "You're not," he began. Raised a hand, not threatening, final. "It's over," she said. Security moved too late. Park's rifle came up, steady, undeniable. No shots fired, none needed. A man in his 40s stepped forward, confident, calm, the architect. "You broke protocol," he said to, almost amused. "Again." She studied him. "You broke trust." He shrugged. "Trust is inefficient." "You used my call sign," she said. "Left it behind like a signature." "Yes," he replied. "Because you're the constant. Where you go, assets move. Where assets move, information flows." "You killed people," said. He didn't deny it. They were already in motion. Something hardened in her then, not rage, resolution. "You're done," she said. He smiled. "You think exposing this will change anything?" "No," replied honestly. "I think stopping you will." Park moved past them, disabling systems with practiced precision. Screens went dark one by one. The quiet grew heavier. Alarms finally sounded, distant, too late. They left the compound as cleanly as they'd entered. No explosions, no speeches. Just absence where something poisonous had been. Back at a neutral airfield hours later, they were met by General, alone, no entourage. She looked at for a long moment. "It's finished," said. Nodded. "It will be buried, sanitized, rewritten." "I know." "And you?" asked. Considered the question. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was being measured. "I'm tired," she said. Smiled sadly. "You've earned that." "What happens to me?" asked. Exhaled officially. "You'll never exist again." Nodded unofficially. "You'll live," said, quietly, "on your terms." Park shifted beside her, and me. Looked at Park. "You'll be promoted, somewhere far from here if you want it." Park glanced at. Shook her head gently. "Go," she said. "Be loud, someone needs to be." Park hugged her without warning, brief, fierce. "Don't disappear too well," Park whispered. "I make no promises," replied. Weeks later stood on a small stretch of coastline far from bases and briefings. The ocean moved the way it always had, indifferent, honest. She worked maintenance at a civilian airfield, flew occasionally, nothing dramatic, nothing classified. Sometimes she heard news, a unit that made it home, a mission that ended before it began, no mention of her, no credit. That was fine. One evening as the sun dipped low, a group of soldiers passed through the airfield, young, loud, alive. One of them paused, looking at her with vague curiosity. "Were you ever military?" he asked. Smiled. "A long time ago." "What did you do?" She thought of valleys and rotors and choices made in seconds that lasted forever. "I flew," she said simply. He nodded, satisfied, and moved on. Watched the horizon darken. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt complete. Because some people weren't meant to be remembered. They were meant to act. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.